Well, it's a joy to be here. Thank you, Brother Patton, it is, right? Brother Patton, for giving me this opportunity, and I suppose the school for giving me this opportunity to be able to share with you. Um, what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to share with you my experiences of reaching people in a restricted country. When I first went into China, I was an English teacher, and I taught in a kindergarten situation. And I had been introduced to a missionary that was there already, and while I was teaching in the kindergarten, I would attend his services. And there may be some things that I will say in this session, or maybe some things that he used that may be a good tool for you. It may not be a good tool. But this missionary, when he started reaching people, he started basically because some of the people that he got to know that were maybe neighbors, or maybe through his teaching he got to know them, they wanted him to have an English class, and he started an English class in his home. And what he did was he used Firm Foundations, which is actually put out by New Tribes, if you're familiar with that. And what it does, it goes from creation all the way to Christ. And he used the Firm Foundations. There is English and Chinese version of that. And when he started this English class, he basically just set the people down, and they would read through the lessons, and they would, of course the lessons were rather lengthy, so he would come to places and he would explain things in the lessons. And as a result of reading through these lessons and teaching them, what happened was there were some people that came to the place where they realized that they were a sinner. And they realized that because they were sinners, that they were bound for hell. And as the lessons proceeded, they basically brought them to the place where Jesus Christ came and died and paid for their sins. Some of them in the class received Christ as a result of these lessons. And the ones that received Christ as a result of these lessons were actually what the nucleus of people that actually formed the church. In the church situation that we have there now, we are renting a apartment building. Basically, it would be considered a house, but if we look at it here, we would look at it as an apartment. And the missionary, when he first started out, of course, he started out in his house. And when we went and took over the work, we continued those classes in our house. And we continued the classes. To my knowledge, he had started that class and he finished it all the way through. And he started other lessons that he had prepared himself and shared with the people that it went through. And then he went back again and got a new class and used the same thing. I think it was very helpful. It may not be totally helpful. It may not be useful for, some of the other, if you had plans of going into reaching people. Now, besides that, reaching people as far as trying to get them to come to these classes, and how do we do that? There are other avenues that we've used. When I was there in China, we would go to the universities, to the English corners. As we would go to the English corners, some of them it was more freely for us to converse with the students than others. Some of them, you would have to come and you would have to write your name or sign a piece of paper or what have you. But then that would give us an opportunity to meet the students. And as we met the students, we'd have an opportunity to invite them to come to, maybe at first we'd have some parties or some things of that nature that would, and then we would have an opportunity to be able to share the gospel with them. And then we would also maybe get a nucleus of those students that wanted to study English and work with them in teaching them English. And then eventually hoping that they would be able to filter into the church. Of course, the church itself, everything that we do in the church, other than the English classes that we offer, are all in Chinese. Now, what happened is we started these, reaching them through the English corners. Well, as a result of that, there was another missionary that came, and we were working. He was not really necessarily working together, but he was working with them. And as he was working with them, what happened is there ended up that some of the students came to know Christ as their Savior, and some of them were burdened to reach their own country for Christ. And as a result of that, some of them gave up their education, which resulted in the fact of the school getting angry with and bringing more stipulations to the English corners and going into reach. And some of them, they wouldn't allow people to go into the English corners, just, anybody. And so in a situation like that, we used those opportunities to reach the people. As of right now, since we have a church, most of the people that come to our church, if they're new and they've never been in church before, most of them come from family members or friends of the people that are already in the church. And there are numerous opportunities to reach people. I started because there were some elderly people in the area where we live, and friends or family of the people in the church. I've started going out to their houses and just having some Bible studies with them and trying to share the Word of God with them and teaching them. And we would sing songs, and we would go and have a Bible study time with them, and that did open up doors of opportunity to reach some of their family members. But you have to realize that most of those people that you come in contact with, if they don't know anything about the gospel, then it's all foreign to them. And it's one of the things that you have to work on a trust basis. Now, these are some of the avenues or the ways that we actually went about teaching them. Now, in my situation, I, of course, stepped into something that was already begun. Now, there may be some people that have the option, and there will be in the future. I will work in a place where there's never been. I'll have to go out and get new people to come in. But these are the ways that I find that we're very receptive to people. Most of the people in China, now I can't speak for all restricted countries, but most of the, especially university age, they're looking for an opportunity to be able to practice their English. And being able to practice it, they see you and then you can practice. Now, some you will find that will attend these little Bible studies maybe basically just for the practice of English. They may do that in the beginning. They may come to the place where they actually trust Christ, but they may not. And so, but you have the opportunity to get the gospel to them. And of course the Lord has to do the part about watering the gospel and drawing them to Himself. So these are some of the ideas. Were we going to allow a time for questioning?
Absolutely. I think we just have to be done at 25 after.
Okay. Before I go to that, let me tell you, when I first went to China, I went under I would say it was a tourist visa, but when I got there, they changed it to a working visa. And that was because I had become a teacher. Now, most of the time, if you're going to go in as a teacher, so to speak, you probably want to find a school that would invite you to come in so that you don't have to work through all the trouble and paperwork of trying to get your visa changed to a working visa. Now, I'll tell you, when I went there, when I finished my language school, after 3 years of language school, I decided that that was enough Chinese for me to get a start and be able to. I'd already started preaching in the language and things, and I decided basically the only reason why I was actually staying in language school was to maintain a visa to be able to stay there. And so I went out and got a job. Now, legally speaking, I wasn't supposed to be working. I was there, so I went and found an agency, and the agency said they would get me a visa. Well, I thought that they were going to get me a proper visa where I could be legally working there. Well, I ended up working in a primary school for a whole year. But basically, I relied upon a visiting visa because my wife is Chinese. And so, but it worked all the way through and nothing happened. But I'm trying to help you. If you want to go and you plan to teach the language, teach English as a second language, then you probably need to find a good school to go to so that they would invite you to come. And I've heard people say that it's good if it's a lot better if you're maybe an English major too. Do you know what I'm saying? Like maybe if you were secondary education, an English major, they would really, I've heard some people say in some instances that that's what you have to have. Now when I went, if I didn't have the certification, they would do something to work you in to be able to teach them because they were accepting teachers. Now, it may be now that they have become tighter, more strict in this area in trying to, they know, I think they're not naive by any means. They would have to know that we're not just coming there just to teach English. We have another means or motive of actually going there to reach them and reach the people. So these are ideas, and we have in the past. I can remember three girls that came from Crown, and they actually got into a school over there and they taught. Sometimes you will find that maybe this one party or the other, whether it be the teacher or whether it be the school, they don't do exactly what they say they're going to do. Normally you have to realize of what you're there for. You have to realize that you're there actually to reach the people. And you may come to a situation where they don't fulfill. When I first went, I had to deal with issues that I just basically, they didn't fulfill their end, but I continued to stay there because I had a burden for the people and a burden to try to reach them. You'll find that anywhere you go, I think. I'm not sure if I covered everything, so I'll give us about, I think we've got about 15 minutes where you can ask a question. Now, I don't know if I'll be able to answer every question that you ask, but I'll try my best.
If your wife she's from China, right?
Yes, sir.
You cannot get a resident visa yourself?
Well, that is in application right now. But does anybody know much about China? I've heard the statement mentioned before, anything can be done in China. It's difficult to get that done. And the idea is, I believe every country around the world has problems with corruption, along with China. And I'm sharing with you the fact that a lot of times there are situations where schools work and you may not even know about it. They work on bribery bribery in certain situations to get what they want. In all of China, on a cultural basis, my wife can attest to this. If a regular Chinese person, normally that does not know Jesus Christ as their own personal Savior, if they go and make a hospital visit, they normally find someone that knows the doctor that they're going to see. They pay that someone a bribery. They pay the doctor a bribery. Anyone that comes along the way that gives them service, that's the way it happens. And it's from the top to the bottom. But we as Christians know it's wrong, right? From the Bible. And so it's very difficult sometimes to work in situations like that, right?
The question is whether it's service, tip for service, or bribery.
Right. I suppose that is it. But when my youngest or my middle son was born, we applied for my permanent residency visa. And these 4 years since I've been back here in the States, I have filled out forms twice of the things that the information that I needed to fill out and give to them twice. And so I'm hoping that something happens to where I'll get that. And that would make it freer for me to be able to come and go as I please. I don't know if there are strings attached, with coming and going and where you're going to be. I know that once you go into the country, normally you have to register at the police station wherever you're living at to let them know, where you are and what you're doing. Basically, where you're living at. And of course, they know what you're doing by the form of visa that you have. Okay.
Questions. How large is your church running now? Is that a problem? Are you having problems with persecution? And what are you doing about multiplying or training nationals?
Well, the first question, that is, the church that we established at first was in our house. That the missionary established and we took it over. It was in our house. And when our first son was born, we moved it out and rented an apartment building. And the church itself right now runs about 15 to 20. 15 to 20. I'll be honest with you. It's a small church. 15 to 20. And that's on a Sunday. We have Sunday morning. We have Sunday Sunday afternoon. And then we have Wednesday. And then sometimes we have other meetings through the week as well. But then you said about problems with persecution. The nearest problem that we have, I think the idea is they worry more about numbers. So the nearest problem that we've had is, one, since I've been back here to the States, we have moved quite a few times to different places. But one time we moved to a new place, and it was time. We live in a colder climate. It was time for the heat to be turned on in the buildings, and our neighbor carried on. And she called the community service. Well, when she called the community service, the first thing she said was, we were a church group and we're meeting illegally. Well, the community service called one of the ladies in our church that was there when they rented the apartment, because she was the one that they were supposed to notify. Well, they called and they asked her about it. Well, then nothing ever happened. Nothing ever happened. They never came and said anything to us. And then that was the closest we've ever been. But I've heard of other people, actually, their meetings in the place where they had to stop, but they went on and moved to other places and met. Does that answer your question? Okay. Well, as far as the missionary, they used the firm foundation, and he had translated your basic Bible doctrines for the church from each doctrine, and it was a chapter basically on each doctrine, and he went through that. The firm foundations, I know it can be gotten in China. I have the Chinese copies and the English copies actually on the computer, and it can be printed out. But you can actually buy the book in China. You can buy the book in China, and it's actually comes in 2 book form. Not in China, but I think it does in other languages. I'm sure it does. I would have to look into that, but I'm sure they have it. I don't know if you would 100% recommend that, but it is a tool that we use, and I found it rather effective. Okay, okay.
Just a note on that, the missionary lady that I stayed with in Japan last summer, that was what she was using to teach an English Bible study as an English, like a free English class.
Right.
So
Right.
I know that she was using that too.
Right. We do also have the Source of Light, some of that material, and it's in Chinese, and that it could be bilingual. You can actually use that if you wanted to too as well.
I would just mention we used the firm foundations in Suriname. I put it in Suriname Tongo on television, and we had a 268 15-minute broadcast over the nation. So I think it's effective there. And we've also used Source of Light material, both in Suriname, we translated ourselves, and also in Chinese here at UT.
Right. Those are very good. Now, you might find some. I'm thinking some of the copies they may have updated though. Some of the copies that we had maybe had a few mistakes in them, but that's really hard to keep from having that. But not big mistakes. Maybe just a character issue.
There are certain characters. It's an international thing. They're not going to put in. They don't put in things as far as church doctrine and baptism in the area. They kind of duck away from that. So when we did our training program for our new converts, we did it our own.
Okay. Well, I think it's a real good program, but the only thing with the firm foundations, I should mention this, and I won't go any further with this unless somebody asks a question. But that basically they encourage you when you teach the lesson not to tell anything about Christ until you get to the end of the lesson. I don't know if you've had any familiarization with that. Of course, you can take the lessons and teach them how you want to. So that's the only thing I kind of didn't like about the lessons.
Other questions?
This young man over here has got one.
Yes, sir. I was wondering, when you go over there to teach English, do they just want to see a TESOL certification or something like a degree in teaching in English? Or
Well,
does that depend on the kind of school you go to or whether you do teaching more of a private?
Well, I think that your TSL certification should be okay. The only thing is, the only reason why I just said a while ago, there were some people that had told me that they were wanting more major in English people. Then I'm not saying it won't work. I think it will work, but you may not be able to have maybe a job in a good location. I mean, but the idea, I'd never had any problem finding a job. Normally there were all kinds of people that wanted to work. Now that you might be picky and choosy as to whether you want to work for them tonight or not, because what happens is some of them are they're like after school schools, and you got to teach whenever they have available classes, and you don't want to work on Sundays because that's when you meet and worship and things. So that could be a problem.
Sir, to what degree is persecution there? I'm talking about if you got arrested or one of your church members got arrested for trying to give out tracts or witnessing, to what degree would persecution or threats come, and how fast, and do you know of some cases of some actual martyrdom? I'm sure you do.
Well, I don't know. I've heard in the past about that, but now the only thing that I've heard of, there's a house church that we are good friends with the people that run the house church. They've been broke into by the religious organization, and they've told them that they had to stop their meetings, and they took key people in that were meeting there, and they took them in and interrogated them, just asked them all kinds of questions. To my knowledge, they'll be looking for your tithing box, things that would be evidence that you're having a meeting. Anything that, like your literature that has been printed that hadn't went through the hands of the government, you could be fined for.
And how fast is Christianity actually growing in China? I've heard different reports.
I think it's growing extremely fast, but a lot of the people that I've run into, they don't have a good foundation. They're not settled. And they don't have real good, strong teachings on the local church. And if we're talking about Baptists and Baptist distinctives, in my area, they're few and far between. There are some, but not many. A lot of what you'll find is the three self-churches, the government-allowed church there and registered church. And so I would think it'd be maybe a little bit equivalent to the Presbyterian, maybe. And I don't know if they have everything, they actually believe everything the Presbyterians do. Now you can go there and hear the gospel. My wife was saved through a ministry of the three self-church. She was saved through that. But as far as good biblical teaching and training, I don't really necessarily recommend that you would stay in a situation like that to receive it. And then that, I think that's a lot of times why. And what you have is these illegal meetings everywhere, and sometimes they're really a mess. They believe this and they believe that, and it's just a mess. And I think this fellow back here with the red tie had a question. Okay. Oh, he did. He okay? Yes, sir.
Are there opportunities to bring pastors of other fellowships together for a teaching time of instruction for pastors?
There are opportunities. Yes, sir. And a lot of times, if I have a special or a person that's coming to teach, I will invite them. Right.
What would you recommend for, say, a high school student who feels God is calling her to a closed country, like China? What would you recommend some steps she should consider taking if that's happening?
Well, I think that as if she has that, I think she ought to read missionary biographies and get to learn about them. And I think it would be good for her to keep in contact with a missionary in that location, and kind of keep up as many as she can, keep up with them, and try to know as much as she can about it. And then if she's going to plan, or she or he is going to plan to further into that field, I think that they should make the steps of trying to work on, is teaching English as a second language, or if there's some type of a country where they can go and they take a trade or something.